Intellectual property, or IP, as it's better known. And this is something that I think has really gotten a free pass politically. And even though it's exceptionally important. And why is it important to someone politically minded? Just the sheer amount of money that it actually creates. When we talk about just exports, intellectual property makes more than food, makes more than agriculture, more than automobiles, more than aviation. So we're talking about millions of jobs and a pretty high percentage of our GDP. It is the only sector that is growing besides the service sector, which is of course finite. And yet, only now did any president appoint IP czar, and this is still a topic that doesn't get discussed in presidential debates or not even in town hall meetings or State of the Union addresses. So this is something that is a bit of a gray area so far as libertarian thought is concerned, and I think rightly so, and in particular in regards to patents. And a patent is essentially a state-enforced monopoly for a process or product for a period of 20 years. What that doesn't mean is any kind of guarantee of success. It's not even a guarantee actually that you can produce whatever it is that you got patented because some other part of whatever it is might actually be patented. All it is the ability to restrict other people from using whatever it is you patented, whether process or product, without permission. So it is by its nature, it stymies competition. So that has to be measured against the money and time and labor that go into whatever it is the actual patented process. It always has to be weighed against whatever it takes to incentivize that sort of innovation. So what is the foundation in the Constitution? It's actually really simple as it is for other facets of intellectual property, and that is a really short line, paraphrasing here, essentially that Congress can make laws to ensure the progress of science and useful arts by limiting or by ensuring for a limited time the right to those respective inventions or creations, whatever it is. So essentially it's to incentivize. It isn't to guarantee anybody any profit. It is simply to incentivize, and that's definitely the lens through which I want to look at several patent processes. So there are a couple of historical examples, I think, that provide one will be a really good pro, I think, and one a really good con so far as whether or not it acts as an incentive. And one historical con, definitely, excuse me, would be regarding the steam engine. Now, who invented the steam engine? You can tell me. Why? Right, except it didn't actually. But that's, a lot of things that where you think someone invented it, actually, maybe they just came up with a popular design. That was Watt's case, is he came up with a popular design, one that was better than it was at the time. And this was around 1760s, and he put all the time and the effort and energy into creating the Watt steam engine without the understanding that he was going to get a patent. Actually, patents were exceptionally hard to get back then. The only reason he got it is because he had a buddy who was capable of lobbying Parliament very heavily. It took very many years, and by 1769, finally he got a patent. And he actually got subsequent patents protecting other facets, anything steam engine related essentially, to where then he had protection for 31 years, a typical amount of time, certainly. So what did that mean for that 31 years? Well, the number of steam engines went from about 500 to 2,200. But he spent that 31 years not making a better design, but rather ensuring that no one else could improve upon his design. There were actually improvements to the design, and through heavy litigation, actually had people jailed over improving on his design. So during this 31 years, there was very little in the way of actually improving. He had several goals that he wanted to achieve that what other people were achieving. That he did nothing but try and stymie those progressions basically. And of course, this went to 1800, 31 years after 1769. And what happened immediately after the patent expired is suddenly there's an explosion in steam engine technology. There's all these different innovations and all these improvements upon design. It's not a coincidence, obviously. It was people just waiting for the patent to expire. So all these years, people are sitting on improvements. The moment the patent expires, they release those improvements. And what happens over the next 15 years is the number of steam engines increases by a factor of 3. So that, I think, and two, it's not as if Watt was making any money off licensing. He actually wasn't improving licensing. He solely wanted every steam engine to be Watted. So he didn't even become exceedingly wealthy off of this. But there are those that theorize that his actions alone, just stopping the steam engine essentially, or not allowing for a better steam engine, I should say, stymied the Industrial Revolution by 10 to 20 years. And that's a pretty significant feat if you think about that. So that's one example, I think, where, you know, I don't know if the patent actually, granted this is the UK and in the US it's all about incentivizing, but you know, our views on patents contemporaneously are pretty similar. Where I don't know that it was about incentivizing anything. He didn't even expect to get a patent, and he put all that time and energy and research into it, not even knowing that he was going to have that exclusivity. And yet there's another example, excuse me for a second. Another historical example, I think, is definitely on the other side. And that is in the late 16th, early 17th century, there was a guy, a French Huguenot, a doctor who practiced in London by the name of Chamberlain. And Chamberlain was an OB, he delivered babies, and at the time, the highest cause of death for women and babies was the actual childbirth. This had a lot to do with infection, obviously, pre-germ theory, all these problems. But a lot of those infections came from obstructed birth, what we would now very quickly and concisely treat with C-section. Back then, there was just not a whole lot they could do for breech, or if the child was stuck in the pelvis, or any of those things. When a bag of water erupts, every hour thereafter is an exponential increase of infection, and therefore they were dying, you know, left and right. And the woman's life back then was more important than the baby's. Often it also ended in you know, aborted children in order to save the mother. Well, this Chamberlain actually came up with a way to use a tool to turn and maneuver the baby in such a way that it could then be pulled out. What we know now as forceps. So it was the tool, but it was also the process, because even now, those who use the forceps would say it's just as much art as it is science and how they were used. Well, he had this process and product. He knew how valuable it was. So what he did is he kept it as a secret. There was no patent law at the time. So when he was using it, he would actually kick everyone else out of the room and put a blanket over himself in order to perform his magic underneath the blanket, whatever it was he was doing. And of course his reputation soared, and so did his patients. And even at the point where he knew what this was worth, so he passed it on to his son, and only his son, who passed it on to his son, who passed it on to another man, who ended up dying with him. So the person that people believe is the inventor of the forceps is actually Smellie, Dr. Smellie of London, in the middle 1800s. So we're talking 150 years without the technology and the process that could save lives. So what was the cost of that? It just, in the basic math, was millions of lives. And imagine that millions of lives are the cost of not releasing this technology and this process. So would a working patent system have prevented that? Would it have said, if 20 years you have the exclusive right to sell these forceps in whatever design you have, and also, you know, the only guy to instruct people in the process, or whatever it is, some sort of monopoly over this for a period of 20 years certainly would have made him exceedingly wealthy, more wealthy, I believe, than any reputation and therefore turnover of patients would have made him.